Welcome to another episode of Cracklin' Rosie True Crime. Today we will be discussing Neysa Moskowitz. Thank you for being here. Let's get to it. Neysa Moskowitz was the mother of Son of Sam victim Stacy Moskowitz, gunned down in the Bath Beach section of Brooklyn in July of 1977. Today we're going to take a closer look at the life of Neysa Moskowitz, specifically two alleged attacks reported in 1981 by Neysa. Before we begin diving into the research, I'd like to share this news archive reel provided courtesy of Carol Duranch, and I will certainly put the link to the video without any commentary in the description of this video. I think it's important to start here because I want you to get a sense of Neysa's personality. I truly believe that shines in this news archive. This clip was taken shortly after the arrest of David Berkowitz and prior to his plea and his sentencing. Let's have a look.
And does it make any difference if she's holding that cigarette or not?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. Thank God, because we wouldn't have this conversation.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Let me, Mrs. Moskowitz, tell me what your reaction was when you learned that David Berkowitz had been found competent to stand trial.
I was elated. I was very, very happy. And if everything else would follow through with everything else, it would be fantastic.
Why do you feel this way?
Well, I just feel that the courts, are really taking a true interest and, because I never really thought he was insane or anything like that. In fact, I used to think he was quite clever. I mean, to map out his strategy going and coming and things like that I think it was ultra dynamite. On his behalf, anyway. And I really cried. And I really cried from happiness, which is something I don't think I've ever done before.
You cried from happiness
Yes.
when you learned what?
That he was found competent.
And this made you happy because why?
Because I feel this is one step up the ladder for gun control and capital punishment, where, I should go back a few steps because I was more lucky than some of the other parents. I still have a child left. Some of them have nothing. And just, I hope anyway, that capital punishment will come in and stay and never be taken away again.
Do you have any feeling as to whether or not this trial should go through the courtroom process or whether it might be disposed of simply by plea?
No, I feel he should go to trial. And my attorney, Spencer Lader, whatever he has told me from the beginning has come out right. And he's made me see a little bit better as far as the courts and things like that, that there are some places that do have justice of some kind. And through him, I became more aware as far as, the laws and what is going to happen.
Why would you rather see this go to trial than end up with a guilty plea?
Because through this, I feel capital punishment will come back and gun control should be there. And this is what I'm fighting for. I mean, in my own way, but this I want very, very badly. I didn't want Stacy's death, to be in vain. I want to see him go to jail. I want the people, and through the medias and the papers and everything else, to show what kind of a person or animal this is, because he is an animal. He is definitely he's a two-legged animal.
How has your life been different these last few months waiting for this ruling to come down?
Do you have any children? No? Well, you wouldn't know. It's a very, very empty. And when your room is across the room, like hers was, it's a very empty feeling. The silence is absolutely deafening. Absolutely deafening. And she was my baby. She was my firstborn, and she's laying now next to my secondborn. You know, when you bury children, as much as you love your parents, your grandparents, and things like that, and you feel sorry and you aching in your heart is just breaking, it's altogether different when you bury two children. One is bad enough, but two. And I don't think it's necessary. It should be like when I was my daughter Ricky's age, 16. I wasn't afraid to walk on the streets. I wasn't afraid to walk out to the corner. I mean, our doors were never really locked. Things went on then, but nothing like they are now.
If this case results in a trial, would you expect to be at the trial?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
I spoke to my lawyer about it, Spencer later, and I will go to the trial every day. Whether if I have 106 or I have to crawl on nails on my belly, I'm going to be at that trial. I don't want to miss a minute of it. Because I want to keep looking at this animal's face with his ridiculous grin and everything else. And I want to see what kind of an animal that took my daughter's life away, that just snuffed it out like that, and for no reason. That's all I want.
I'm sure you found that very emotional to watch. She was so sharp. She was so passionate. She wanted the death penalty. She wanted a trial. Had there been a trial, perhaps there wouldn't be so many unanswered questions. Let's move on to the written archives. So let's get to it, guys. Here's Neysa Moskowitz with her ultra cool shades. She was truly a lady of style. I'm going to share with you some information from an excerpt that I took from Sons of Sam, who was Neysa Moskowitz. I found this on meow.com, and I will have everything that I share with you today on my Facebook. So we won't be going verbatim on everything. I just like to have my notes so that I don't miss anything that I wanted to share. Who was Neysa Moskowitz? Neysa was Stacy's mother. In 1978, Neysa, during Berkowitz's trial, shouted back across the packed Brooklyn courtroom, "You animal." And we all know why she shouted that out at him. He was spurting out terrible nonsense. And for those of you that aren't that familiar with the case, right here's a picture of her daughter, Stacy. She lived a long life and died at the age of 73 in 2006. But as per an obituary published in the New York Post, she remained fiery and funny in the face of unspeakable tragedy. The piece claimed that 29 years before her death, over a drink with the New York Post's Steve Dunleavy, she vowed vengeance on Berkowitz. "I don't believe in turning the other cheek when you take a child from a mother," she said at that time. As strange as it may sound, however, her stance on vengeance changed over the years. She would say things like, "This kind of anger can make you sick. Don't let anger eat you up," said her close friend and neighbor, Sharon Denaro. In fact, she even made peace with him. As per the New York Post, Berkowitz sent her letters and even a Mother's Day card. While she did not support his bid to be let out of prison or on parole, she did forgive everyone, as per Denaro. She needed to relieve herself of anger to be able to move forward with her life, Denaro said. So let's just jump back here and talk a second about these letters. So I recently purchased Hamat's book because I thought that maybe there'd be some of the letters in there, which they weren't. That's okay. I know that recently those letters have been mentioned in an interview with Mike Caparelli and Francesi. I hope I'm not saying that wrong. But Mike Caparelli recently released the book Monster Mirror. They had an interview, a taped interview with Berkowitz, and these letters were mentioned. So I'll get back on topic in a moment. First, the letters. If these letters are available, we'd love for them to be made, available to read. I know that they're probably very sensitive, and so for that reason, they are not part of the public domain, but they sure would be interesting to read, the conversations back and forth, because there's a little controversy there. I understand the need for Neysa to give forgiveness, to move on so that the turmoil doesn't eat her up inside. But it kind of goes back and forth whether she really forgave him or not. So that's all I'll cover on that. But jumping back to Francesi and Caparelli, where's the interview? The footage, the file footage, the recorded footage. Or I can only speak for myself. I am anxiously awaiting the drop of that video. I would really like to see that coverage. A little bit has been shown in interviews here and there, but just curious, when is that video coming out in its entirety? Inquiring minds want to know. All right, so here's Neysa, and this is her obit. She was born June 18th, 1933 in the Bronx. She died on September 26, 2006, again at age 73. At that time, she was a resident of Miami-Dade County, Florida. Now, very sad. Part of this just talks a little, and I'll spend a moment or two going through this. Of course, her husband was Jerry Moskowitz, daughter Stacy, victim in the Son of Sam crimes. Jody Lynn Moskowitz, this is really sad. It appears that she was about 10 years old, and from what I can see, I believe she may have died of a possible, I hate to get struck, but of a possible suicide. And then her daughter Ricky later died. Neysa outlived her, but she also died of illness, and I might look a little deeper into that. So sad, her life. All right, so this is an article from Tampa Bay Times, and it's dated May 15th, 1979. There's that. There's some more cool glasses. Okay. So in this article, I'm not going to read the whole thing verbatim, but it talks about Neysa and her lawyer reporting that Neysa wanted to produce a movie, and it came about because she was outraged knowing that Berkowitz was going to profit from movies and book deals and all that good stuff. So, again, this is before the Son of Sam law really went into effect. We all know that any proceeds that did come from those deals back in that day went to the Victims Advocacy Fund. But I guess prior to this, people were saying, wait a minute, this monster, he's going to make money on this, he's going to make money on that, and look at what he's done. And so there was a point at this time, again, May 1979, where Neysa had actually wanted to make a video or movie about Stacy. So that was one of my red flag notes to see if any of that ever happened. I'm not aware of it, but I don't claim to know everything. It was just something that stood out to me, and so I put it here because if we do a follow-up on this, that might be something that we dig a little bit into. This is really what I wanted to cover today. So, this is from the Standard Star, March 21st, 1981. So those of you that are familiar with this case may or may not know that there were 2 attacks reported against Neysa Moskowitz. And evidently, I'm going to read portion of this article to you and then a portion of another. So the title is Attack Reported on Son of Sam Victim's Mother. And this is a portion of an article which was written by Ed Trapazzo. Ed, I've been trying to reach you. I want the rest of this article, and I had some questions for you. If you happen to be around, I sent you a message, and I'd love to hear from you if you are interested in speaking. The mother of Son of Sam's last victim says she was roughed up Tuesday night in her Brooklyn home by 2 tall assailants who commanded her to keep quiet about new information linking the murders to a Yonkers-based satanic cult. So again, the date, March 1981. So this is when the story was changing to others involved. And at this time, she's saying, so it was 2 nights before this article came out, that she was attacked. Neysa Moskowitz, whose daughter Stacy was killed in the mass murderer's final ambush, was rocked by a powerful backhand slap to the face after being told, "Stay away from Berkowitz. This is a warning." Brooklyn detectives said late Tuesday night they were investigating the attack but offered no other information. The attack came less than 1 week after Gannett Westchester Rockland newspapers reported that David Berkowitz, who had long claimed he was the lone son of Sam Triggerman, now says he was aided by satanic cultists in carrying out the murderous spree on the New York City metropolitan area in 76 to 77. Let's now take a look at what was reported by law enforcement. All right, so I've taken myself off the screen so that you can see better. All of these documents will be added to my Facebook. So a few days after the first reported assault in March 81, we had 2 articles come out with a little bit of information and feedback from law enforcement. So the first one is Police Probe Moskowitz Assault. It's from Journal News Wires. Brooklyn detectives said Wednesday night they came up empty-handed after investigating a report that the mother of the son of Sam's last victim was roughed up by 2 assailants Tuesday night. So she said that they broke in and backhanded her. Police said that Mrs. Moskowitz spent several hours Wednesday at the 61st Precinct in Brooklyn examining mugshots and composite drawings. She was unable, however, to identify the 2 men that threatened and slapped her inside her Brooklyn apartment Tuesday night. I'm not reading all of it, I just want to give you some take of what went on. No suspects in attack on Sam's victim's mom. Neysa Moskowitz, mother of the last son of Sam victim, says she had been attacked and threatened twice in 7 weeks at her Brooklyn apartment, but police remain without suspects in either case. So this actually follows up after the second reported assault. So the first one, she was threatened and backhanded, and they told her, stay away from Berkowitz. They gave her a warning. Take this as a warning. Stay away from Berkowitz. The second one, and I'll read a little bit of another excerpt for you, is where they etch the X on her arm, and I'll show you that picture. But let me just see if there's anything else here that I want to share. Yes, over here. The latest attack occurred Tuesday when Mrs. Moskowitz told police 2 men entering her apartment by climbing through an open terrace. She said they told her, "You're still keeping up with Berkowitz. We'll see how afraid you are." They then cut an X mark in her bicep with a razor and fled after jumping 25 feet from the terrace, police said. Mrs. Moskowitz received medical aid for the cut at Coney Island Hospital Tuesday night and later released. Police said the men stayed no longer than 5 minutes in the apartment and that Mrs. Moskowitz told them that they had contemplated having her taste her own blood before fleeing. So the first attack, it looks like it was on March 24th. That's when they roughed her up and smacked her, said stay away from Berkowitz. And then several weeks later, this looks like about 6 weeks later, they broke in and etched the X on her. Here's another article from Citizen Register, May 6, 1981. And son of Sam victim's mother attacked again. So this is the second attack. Later we'll hear Neysa say that there were several attacks, but I only have documentation on 2 reported attacks. But later once she starts getting involved more with Maury Terry, it sounds like she was reporting or saying more attacks. So after the first rough up, the police at the 61st precinct basically said that they couldn't comment at that time. But it looks like they said they came up empty. So okay, so over here it says, police said they have no suspects, but said Mrs. Moskowitz had provided detailed description of her attackers. They talk about her going into Coney Island Hospital, so she was treated for the wound. She told police 2 collegiate-looking men in their late 20s entered her second-floor Brooklyn apartment by climbing through an open terrace at about 9 p.m. She said they were not the same men who had roughed her up in late March. So in the second attack, 2 young guys, collegiate-looking, broke into her apartment and etched the X on her arm, is what she reported. She said the intruders told her, "You're still keeping up with Berkowitz. We'll see how afraid you are." Then they cut what was described as an X marked on her bicep with a single-edged razor, she said. And again, they mentioned that she said that the attackers first sought for her to taste her own blood, but they decided to flee. And then this is another excerpt from, this is the whole article, Sam's victim mom claims attack. And it basically says the same thing, but the police came up empty. She did seek treatment in the second attack. Remember the first one, she was threatened and backhanded. The second one, about 6.5 weeks later, they broke in again, the collegiate-looking assailants, and etched the X. The police came up empty. She went to the hospital for the second reported attack. After the first, she went to the station, 61st Precinct, and they had her looking through mugshots and whatnot. Okay, here's another one. Attacks by cult claimed. So there were several, and I was just looking for different interesting clips within each one. I don't want to sit here and read them all for you. Again, they will be available on my Facebook. Okay, so this was in the Albuquerque Tribune. This one is reported July 26, 1983. So now 2 years later. Oh, okay, I know why I highlighted this for you. Mrs. Moskowitz said cult members claiming associates with Berkowitz had cut her arms and legs in attacks outside her Brooklyn apartment building last year. Mrs. Moskowitz said police did not believe her charges. So, unless this was a third attack, because the first ones were in 81, this one's dated 83, now she is claiming that it happened outside of the Brooklyn apartment. Remember, she said they broke in through an open terrace, or through the terrace. And I guess at this point, she believes that the police don't believe her stories. The police, said I was just a frustrated housewife, Mrs. Moskowitz said. So she reports. Second one, she goes to the hospital. Police come up empty. And then she says that they don't believe her. Here's another one. Son of Sam cult hurt me, victim's mother. And what do I have highlighted here? Okay, this is what I brought up before. Neysa Moskowitz, mother of Berkowitz, his last victim, Stacy Moskowitz, said this week she had been assaulted 3 or 4 times by members of the cult. And this one's dated July 27th, 1983. So by 83, now it's 3 or 4 times. But I only found documentation on 2 reports. Harry Lipsig, a lawyer representing several of Berkowitz's victims and the families, said he taped conversations with Berkowitz that had been admitted as testimony in the lawsuits. In the tapes, Berkowitz mentioned the existence of a cult, the lawyer said. So I just highlighted that because, all right, Lipsig was representing the victims' families pretty much. And he was working with, my understanding, her lawyer and with Bobby Violante and some of the other victims because they had lawsuits. And we're not going to talk about that today, but maybe at some time we will. I do have information that I pulled together with, after this case, who got what promotions in NYPD and what were the monetary settlements for the people that did have lawsuits against Berkowitz. But again, we'll come back to that. All right, so we'll just summarize that because then we'll be moving on to the relationship with Neysa Moskowitz and David Berkowitz. Let's jump back. So we'll have a little timeline. Here's our summary. So in 79, she's thinking about producing a movie because she's very distraught and upset that Berkowitz is getting so much attention, and she wants the memory of her beautiful daughter Stacy to be on the forefront of that. Okay, March 21st, 1981 is when this article came out, and it was 2 days prior, okay? So it would have been March 19th. That was the first attack. Backhand slap to the face. Stay away from Berkowitz. This is a warning. And again, the attack came less than a week after Gannett, Westchester, Rockland newspapers reported that David Berkowitz was aided by satanic cultists. Okay? A couple days later, cops come up empty. They investigate, they come up empty. May 6, 1981, so early in May, about 6 weeks later, she's attacked again. Two collegiate students, they break in through the terrace and X-mark the bicep. She's treated in the hospital, released. And then by 83, it's obvious here she's holding the ultimate evil. So she's had correspondence with Maury Terry. And I don't have a lot of information on that, but we'll just kind of go through here. And again, by this time, the attacks are being characterized as 3 or 4 times. And she obviously not happy because she's mentioning here that the police don't believe her. So in summary, 2 reported attacks that grew to 3 or 4 by 1983. Did they happen? I'm not saying that Neysa lied about it, but this intrigues me. It's not a huge aspect of the case, but it just intrigues me. And it's information that I've had in the depths of my files and just, never really presented, never really dug deep into it. But you have 2 attacks that later grow. Police come up empty. That doesn't mean it didn't happen because they came up empty, but it seems to me that, well, at least according to Neysa, they weren't believing her. So what do you think? Do you have information about this? For some of you who may have been following the case in the 80s a lot longer than I have, maybe you have more information of this because you lived it, or maybe you have documentation that I just don't have. So if you do, I'd love for you to share. As always, I never claim to be the goddess of information. I look, I research, and I share, and it's always with the hopes that, you will have something that I don't have, and we could share and shed some light on things. All right. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the next section of this video where we talk a little bit about Berkowitz, Neysa, the relationship, the letters, the forgiveness, and or did she really ever forgive him? Did she ever really believe that he murdered Stacy or that he was involved and someone else murdered Stacy? I don't know. Did she forgive him because she needed to forgive him? All right, let me get this stuff together and I will be right back on screen with you. Thank you for your patience. Just one more thing quickly before we move on. I promised you a view at this picture. Of course, most of you have probably seen it already. If you can see right here, that's the scar of the X, and this picture was taken in 83. I'm going to try zooming, moving it over a little bit so that you can see. Right there. And now we'll move on. All right. Well, we are back with what we know about the relationship between Neysa Moskowitz and David Berkowitz. So if we jump back to the time of his arrest, there was no reason for Neysa to believe that there was anyone other than Berkowitz responsible for the murder spree. She showed a hatred towards him. She wanted death penalty. She wanted to be at that trial, and she wanted him to pay for what he did. But over the years, they did develop somewhat of a relationship. We covered in little detail about letters or correspondence that went back and forth from Neysa to David. But we're going to start here from a Pace Law Review from Prison Ain't Hell. And we've referred to this before in other videos. Pretty interesting. I'm going to take it right where I have highlighted. In 2007, Berkowitz issued a public apology for his crimes. Berkowitz said he prays daily for those he injured and the families of those he killed. I'm not going to read this public apology. Many of you probably read it. It's on Berkowitz's site at thatariseandshine.org. You can go there to read it. I just had 2 lines highlighted here that will place it in timeline. So here they do mention, surprisingly, forgiveness did eventually come to him from Neysa Moskowitz, the mother of his last victim, Stacy Moskowitz. And then it goes on to talk about his Christianity. So, she eventually, or it's said that she eventually forgives David Berkowitz. And again, I mentioned it before, that perhaps she had to do that for her own sanity and her own healing. They definitely corresponded, and you'll hear there's a little bit more information in The Devil in David Berkowitz article. So I'm going to come back to this little excerpt here in a moment. So New York, September 8, 2006, The Devil in David Berkowitz. And it's by Steve Fishman. And it's just excerpts. Again, available on my Facebook. A couple days when I get to it. All right. Several years ago, he wrote to Neysa Moskowitz, mother of the last victim, Stacy the Blonde. Neysa had rarely passed up a chance to tell the press that she loathed David. And I'm going to stop there for a minute. For those of you familiar with this case, Neysa was very active in the media. She was very vocal. So some of the families, some of the victims, clammed up. They wanted to move on with their lives and they didn't get too involved. But Neysa did. And if you listen to a clip, maybe I'll put it at the end of this one, or maybe I'll just cut a little clip and put it under separate cover. She does say, she goes on Geraldo Rivera as well as other shows, but at that time that she went on Geraldo Rivera's show, she does state that she believed that there were others involved in the crime. So I might do that under separate cover. Let's come back here. All right. The Lord put it in my heart to reach out to her. This is Berkowitz's words, because Neysa's suffering a lot. David says he wrote to her in September 2000. I am sorry that I ruined your life and your dreams. Neysa wrote back. A relationship developed. David even sent her Mother's Day cards. Eventually, David called her from the prison yard. I started crying and began apologizing, he says. They talked about Stacy. He says even shared a few laughs. Later, when a Christian admirer mailed David $20,000, he sent $1,000 to Neysa, which she appreciated. He says he didn't keep any of the money. At one time, Neysa and David, this is important, even planned to meet at the prison. It was going to be filmed for TV. Neysa says she wanted information about the murder of her daughter. David backed out. I couldn't in my heart. It would be a circus. I had personal things to share. I didn't want to be used, he says. Soon thereafter, the relationship fell apart. Neysa's forgiveness was withdrawn. David tells me glumly, she's back to hating me. Okay? So, when this article was written in 2006, she was back to hating him. And the rest doesn't have to do with Neysa. So she was going to meet him in person, but it was going to be this big televised event. And according to what he's saying, Berkowitz didn't want that. So she recanted her forgiveness. But this was something, and I'm going to be honest with you, it was a clip. I don't know if it was from the same magazine article. And if I'm not mistaken, this might have been shared in one of the groups by SOS community member Paul Hart. I'm not 100% certain, but I think so. This was just a little piece of an article. And I'll read you this part. And Neysa, whatever forgiveness she may have once expressed, blames David alone. She had a letter from him that settles the matter for her. I hope that one day you will forgive me for taking your daughter's life, he wrote. So if the timeline is correct, initially she had no reason to believe it was anybody other than Berkowitz involved in the murder of her daughter. Then she started believing that there were others involved, and that jumps us back to the assaults. Again, we don't really know if it happened and what exactly happened other than what was reported in those few excerpts from the periodicals at that time. But, could it have been something where she wanted to stay in the media because in her mind, if she thought that there were others involved with the murder of her daughter, she wanted it solved. She wanted to know everything. I mean, you would want that as well. So that's just a possibility to think about. And then they had correspondence back and forth. They spoke on the phone. They were going to meet. That didn't happen. That fell through. And to me, the way I'm reading this is that she died believing that Berkowitz was the one who killed her daughter, because that's what he said in that final letter before they lost touch. I'm super interested to hear your thoughts on this. Again, I'm not an expert. This is something that I have been sitting on and just wanted to bring out because I find it super interesting. If you know more about this, share it. This, I think, merits more dialogue and maybe even a live if there's interest. So put it in comments, put it in chat. I hope that you got something out of this. Take a look on my Facebook page for some documentation, some of the things that we covered today. And I'll also, within the next day or two, try to get that little clip, the Geraldo clip. If that's important, most of you probably saw it already, but I'll try to get that and have it either on the Facebook or I'll throw it on our community page on YouTube. So I think I'm going to end this here. I hope that this isn't the end of this discussion. I hope that you enjoyed learning some about Neysa Moskowitz. I find her so interesting and her life so tragic. So may she rest in peace. Again, thank you for being here with me tonight or today, whatever time it is by you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'll be signing off. Thank you. Peace.